Hi, thank you for joining. I am Michelle Lowe. I'm based in New York, gallerist and art advisor. I'm hosting a series of conversations with artists whose work are included in an exhibition, Golden Door. It's currently on view at Silvermine Arts Center. The exhibition will start from October 31st to January 15th of next year. The Golden Door exhibition really tells a story of becoming American or being American by artists initially from different parts of the world and different parts of the country, but decide to make this country, US, as their home. So today I'm talking with Rick Shaefer from his studio. Rick is really a native Connecticut, but grew up traveling extensively in Europe as part of the military family. And so I think, Rick, you're quite influenced by European landscape art as a young age. And then Rick went to California, LA, to study photography, then Duke University to study painting. So we're very delighted to speak with Rick in his studio, and we're fortunate to be able to see this painting that's behind him before it's taken to Silvermine for the installation. So hi, Rick.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Yeah, so I'm glad you are able to show us this work, and the size looks very substantial. Can you tell us what's the size of the painting?
Yeah, it's 10 feet by 15 feet.
So it's quite, when you're standing in front of it, I feel the impact is quite significant. And also this work really, from your perspective, tells or narrates the story of war. So I'm gonna ask you to be kind enough to walk us through the painting, because there's so much detail and so much reference from various of influence and tradition and historical events and also religious anecdotes. So could you tell us a little bit about the work? How do you come to think about making this work?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that despite COVID, despite all the precautions that everybody has to take, some of the viewers get to actually go to the show to see this piece in person, because I think the one, you'll enjoy the drawing better, and two, like you say, the scale is very important, and the impact of the piece is really brought forth by just being there in person with it. So anyway, I guess this piece grew out of my frustration of hearing all the dialogue about building a wall. And this is my kind of response. It came to me as kind of a vision, intact, totally intact, one vision of the whole thing. I didn't have to kind of work it as usual of trying to fit several different pieces in. It was the whole scene kind of came at once, which is strange for me. But anyway, there's so much here. I'll touch on a few main notes, and I know you can't see in the screen the whole piece, but I think you can start to see a bit of the structure here and all the machinery and the construction activity here. I think you can see some helicopters flying above and perhaps an angel flying up there. So right. These are elements that don't usually go together, but in this piece, I'm borrowing, as you said, from so many different historical and artistic genres and references, and trying to meld them all together into a piece that's trying to explain this long history of wall making and wall construction that mankind's been in since almost the beginning of time.
Rick, just so you know that I'm sharing my screen so people can see the details. They can see you in front of the painting, but as well as the little bit more zeroing details.
Okay, good. So given that photograph, I'm just finishing up on the right-hand side. It's a drawing, a charcoal drawing, and it's in 5 panels. So I'm working on that last panel to the right. So you can see in this photograph that there's 2 curtains on the side, there's angels floating above, there's a crest at the bottom with some text running along the bottom, and there's a large vista showing in the piece. There's a group of, you can see just at where my knee is, kind of a group of dignitaries or officials that are gathered around plans. Yes. So those are all elements that I took, and I think subconsciously, from 17th and 18th century commemorative engravings that often had these various elements in it. They were usually commemorating some big important event, like a battle or a building of a construction site, like the Versailles or something. And they often had these elements in, with the curtains, the angels, to show that one, it was majestic and important, and 2, that the heavens were involved in blessing whatever the event was, or perhaps not blessing the event. And the text on the bottom usually gave a little descriptive narrative for the viewer. The crest was usually the Pope or the general or the official or something.
And can you tell us a little bit about who are these figures? They look very authoritarian figures in this particular part.
Part of on top of borrowing all these elements from the engravings was the sense that I wanted to get across of a time dissonance where there's various elements from different times, and these guys are a kind of a 40s, 50s Americana time frame. The gentleman in the middle is Walt Disney, chosen because I think I wanted the theatricality and the grandiose nature of this event to sort of be part of the American the building of America, kind of in that 1950s, mid 20th century period where grand construction events were taking place, and Disney, of course, building his fantasy world. Then there's, to his right, there's Robert Moses, who was an architect in New York. One could argue did some damage to possibly struck the sense of New York City. Albert Speer to his left, who was the architect of the Third Reich. And then the other gentlemen are probably bankers or officials or something, and they all have little name tags. In the middle, to the right, just peeking out from behind, is Emma Lazarus, the only woman in the group. And she, of course, wrote the sonnet that the title of this piece, The New Colossus, is borrowed from, which is engraved on the base of the Statue of Liberty. Give me your poor, your tired, your huddled masses. And so this is kind of a parody or a negation of that sentiment of the young country welcoming people from various countries and lands. And now this contemplation of building a wall. So the wall itself, real quickly, I'll just so the scale and the scope and the massiveness of the wall was really sort of to drive home the point of the hyperbole of the event, the overreaching kind of hubris of the event. And it's actually borrowing visual information from two different dams. One, the Hoover Dam, which are those towers above, and the Three Gorges Dam, which is in China. It was just recently built. And one huge touchstone for me was Peter Bruegel the Elder's painting of the Tower of Babel, where he has this massive, massive structure with these little teeny ant-like figures crawling all over it with all kinds of construction lifting devices. This is one of the lifting devices kind of brought, so that's a 16th century lifting device next to a 50s crane. And there's all this, again, time dissonance written into this piece.
I also wanted to ask you about this particular image, because now, particularly after all these incidents, the 9/11, this helicopter or airplane has a very, very different connotation for people who, like us, in New York versus, you know, people from different parts of the world. What makes you to include that in this whole majestic painting?
Well, it's part of the general activity. The tempo of the piece has got all this activity going on, and the different helicopters flying above it. There's I think 3 or 4 different varieties. They serve a purpose to sort of be these somewhat like in Hieronymus Bosch painting, where they're these kind of odd flying creatures, but here they're doing various things like one is carrying actually a boat over the wall that looks like a boat full of refugees, kind of an ironic touch for something out in the desert and a dam that's out in the desert and a boat suddenly being lifted over the dam. So I think they serve as kind of this slightly military industrial complex of the last century, that idea that this is a somewhat of a militarized event.
Yeah, I couldn't stop noticing the details. You know, when I look at this close up, the details of the curtain with this kind of texture, it's velvety texture, and it's almost 3-dimensional. How do you, I mean, this takes tremendous skill and time, right, for you to complete this?
Well, the curtains are kind of meant to sit on top or in front of, visually and structurally in front of this tableau. So they had to be 3-dimensional. They had to look like they're almost in the room with you. There was that kind of visceral feeling of texture and depth and presence. They're also an element that's slightly dark in tone, and the curtains are pulled aside to seemingly possibly by the angels to sort of have a reveal of what's going on. So they add a kind of theatricality, and they also add a sense of revelation to the piece.
And even the background of the sky, I think, you actually drawn the whole background from here, right? If I look at behind the helicopter.
Yeah, so you can see a little bit the actual pencil, the charcoal. That's the one reason I would really like people to see this in person.
Absolutely.
There's all the kind of mark making that goes on. It's not photorealism. It's not blurred or smudged or rubbed. Every mark is sitting there distinct. So that's my style that I've kind of adopted for my drawing practice, and I think it's fun for the viewer to see the vitality of the mark making in order to get a sense of how many choices went into the drawing of the piece.
Absolutely. I also want to ask you about this particular figure, angel, that's flying. Is this borrowed from another, work, historical work?
Yes. Both of the angels are borrowed from Baroque art. I believe at least one of them, I believe, is a Rubens, and off the top of my head, I can't recall if this particular one is or is not. They're taken obviously out of context. They're probably in some kind of I think these might have been from the Marie de Medici series, but I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Right. Well, how long does it take you to actually work on this? This was started in last year?
It was started at the end of 2018, just at the end. So I started it in 2019 for real. Yeah, so it took a few months for sure. I try not to remember how long things take, but it took quite a while. There's a lot in this piece, not just from a drawing standpoint, but from an element standpoint, from all the little bits and pieces, and trying to tie them all together, and to also create that kind of atmospheric look into the distance where this structure seems to go on and on forever.
Yeah, I think, for those of us who are nearby in the area, I really encourage people to go and see the work. Even myself haven't seen it, but just by looking at you standing in front of it, the proportion scales wise, I feel it has a tremendous impact once you're standing in front of the work.
Yeah.
And Rick, you also made this really interesting book about the work, right? It's sort of taking parts of different components of it and draw into it, takes us through the whole narrative of this particular piece. So I'm hoping at the Silvermine they might have some books there for people to peruse.
Yeah, I think that would be the idea, perhaps, of interesting ideas to have maybe a dozen or so books, and I'll sign them for sale at the show, and maybe one that people can look at.
Fantastic. One last question: how long does it take you to complete this piece?
Oh, well, we already kind of talked about
2018.
It takes, I don't know, yeah, a few months mostly. But then there's a lot of post drawing that has to go on. It's like fixing and painting on the back. They actually, not to get into too much detail, but this is painted from the back and drawn from the front. So there's a lot of work that goes on after the drawing.
Yeah, it's such requires such meticulous work and a great craftsmanship and technique. So I'm so pleased that we're able to see this. Take a quick peek before the show starts, and best luck with the show. I'm sure I will go visit, and hopefully I will see you there. Thank you very much for tuning today. Please come back next week, Thursday, 5 p.m., where I will be talking with another artist from the show. Thank you for now. Bye.
Bye.